Union General Daniel Sickles is one of the most controversial figures of the American Civil War. In fact, he's one of the most controversial figures in the United States in that whole era. And each one of these items before me is inscribed to Daniel Sickles in that period. So we have a beautiful presentation sword inscribed to Sickles in 1861. We have a cane presented to Sickles in 1864. And then we have a Colt 1855 Root revolver inscribed to Sickles in 1867. So if you don't know Daniel Sickles, he was one of the most infamous figures of the antebellum era and the Civil War era, and continued to be a prominent figure into the late 19th century. So the sword is dated 1861, so that's right at the beginning of the American Civil War. And the inscription has Excelsior right across the top, which is the motto of the state of New York, meaning like ever higher, ever upward. And it's also the name of the brigade that Sickles raised for the Union Army, which was a whole controversial thing where he was a Democrat connected to Tammany Hall in New York, but the Republican governor of New York didn't like him. So there were some shenanigans there, but Lincoln actually stepped in to help him, retain command of this brigade. So he leads that brigade early in the Civil War. Sickles was a political general. So he was not a West Point graduate. He didn't have very much prior military experience, but his political connections led him to become an important general during the Civil War, and he had the support of President Abraham Lincoln. In early 1863, after having led the Excelsior Brigade early in the Civil War, he was given command of the 3rd Corps, and he led them in 1863 at the Battle of Chancellorsville. In that battle, he held the high ground but was ordered to pull back, and then the Confederates used that high ground to shell the Union lines and launch an attack that ultimately led to the Confederate victory at Chancellorsville. That was in May of 1863. In July of 1863, Sickles was the commander of the 3rd Corps at Gettysburg. While all the events of Sickles' life are dramatic, it is just July 2nd, 1863 that absolutely secures his place in American history. As the commander of the 3rd Corps at Gettysburg, he disobeyed General Meade's orders. Sickles was ordered to keep his men on the Union left, but instead, he moved his men about a mile forward because he saw slightly higher ground. There can be little doubt that he was thinking about what happened at Chancellorsville. He wanted the high ground to position his artillery in an optimal position. Instead, the Confederates launched their attack, and the 3rd Corps was hit from 3 sides. This forced General Meade to continue to reposition Union divisions to support Sickles' command and prevent a collapse of the Union line, ultimately leading to Gettysburg being one of the bloodiest battles in American history. The 3rd Corps alone suffered immense casualties, and during the battle, General Sickles himself was hit in the leg by a cannonball. As he was being carried off on a litter, he propped himself up, smoked a cigar, and encouraged his men to fight on. He was soon taken back to Washington, D.C. after having his leg amputated, and was one of the first people to report on the Union victory to President Abraham Lincoln. Almost immediately, Sickles moved to take credit for the Union victory, and historians have debated ever since what his impact was on the battle. Did Sickles, by placing his men forward, basically create a Union victory through a defense in depth, or did he just cost thousands of Union lives unnecessarily? Ultimately, what the Union did was fall back to the original positions that Sickles was supposed to hold. But the Confederates weren't expecting to smash into Sickles in the Peach Orchard either. So that slowed their momentum in their charge and their attack on the Union line as well. In the end, the Union, of course, emerged victorious at Gettysburg, and Gettysburg remains the most famous battle of the American Civil War. After the battle, as I mentioned, Sickles went back to D.C. and was already trying to claim credit for the victory. But because he was unpopular with men like General Meade, especially after slandering Meade to Lincoln and anybody else who would listen, he was kept out of field commands. Sickles wanted to go back and fight some more. You can say anything you want about Daniel Sickles, but he clearly was a man of courage and a man of action. He didn't want to sit back and just nurse his wounds. He wanted to be back in command. But with one of his legs now amputated, he was kept out of a field command. So that makes the next piece we've got here, this cane presented in 1864, particularly relevant. Sickles was missing a good chunk of one of his legs after the Battle of Gettysburg, so he could not move around or walk around unassisted for the rest of his life. So something like this cane, which is more robust than your average walking stick of the period, made sense as a presentation piece to Sickles. And the inscription is inscribed to him from a gentleman from New York, where Sickles was a prominent politician and where he was connected to Tammany Hall. So again, fits perfectly in with Sickles' story. So though he was kept from a field command, Sickles remained in the Army for many years, including into Reconstruction, where he was placed in command of multiple departments in the American South. And he was, though a notorious figure, he actually was instrumental in protecting the rights of freedmen and laborers in the South in the very tumultuous post-war years. And that's when this revolver over here was presented to him. It's inscribed on the backstrap to him from Colt Firearms, and the revolver was manufactured in 1867, which is also the same year his wife died. So shortly after he would have been presented this revolver, he finally retired from the military, but he did not retire from public service. He actually then served as a U.S. minister abroad, had some shady relationships with the deposed Queen of Spain, remarried, and then came back to the United States. And once back in the U.S., he again was basically lobbying for Dan Sickles. General Sickles was, if nothing else, a man out there to support himself. So he worked diligently to take credit for the victory at Gettysburg after the American Civil War. He was a regular attendee of the various post-war Civil War reunions, and he then became important in establishing the Gettysburg National Military Park. So as a congressman, after returning back to the U.S., he was one of the sponsors for the bill that created that park. And then he also served in roles relating to the monuments at Gettysburg. But famously, there were no monuments to General Sickles at Gettysburg. When asked about this, Sickles said the whole battlefield was a monument to Sickles. Sickles is easily one of the most famous Union generals of the American Civil War, and one of the most famous figures of the antebellum and Reconstruction era as well. And we rarely get the opportunity to have one item from a man like this, let alone three. These three items represent, important steps in his life. So you've got the sword early in the Civil War when he's the commander of the Excelsior Brigade. You have the cane from after the Battle of Gettysburg, after he's lost a leg, which I should mention, he later earned the Medal of Honor for his courage in that battle. Despite how controversial his actions are in the battle, his courage in leading his men in combat earned him the Medal of Honor later in his life. And then we've got a Colt Root revolver inscribed to him from the factory in the late 1860s after the Civil War, while he was still a general serving in the Reconstruction of the American South and then transitioning into public service roles as an ambassador and later rejoining Congress. So all three of these items are available on our upcoming December premiere auction. I encourage you to go online and read the full descriptions. There's a lot more details about Sickles' really crazy and complicated life in those descriptions, and you can kind of see how they all fit together within Sickles' story.